Brian Chesky.
Thank you.
So I can tell you he's the sub 300 richest man in the world. I can tell you all this and all that. But what I can really tell you, he's a cool dude. And he came here because he is actually the closest example, Mike was just saying, is to inclusive capitalism that you have. Tell everybody in the lobby, I want them inside here, I want you all to experience this conversation as we wrap this up. If you want a business plan that you can all touch to improve your life, he's got it. Joe, your co-founder, was with us a few years ago. A great guy. He now runs, I think, the foundation for the company. I said yesterday that our friend Sam Altman was probably the Steve Jobs of this generation. That's because not only is he a genius, but he was fired and rehired like Steve Jobs was, and that explosion put him on the front page of everything in the world, and without question, he's doing important work. And what you may not know is the one behind the scenes really pushing to get Sam back into the CEO seat was actually Brian Chesky. So he was out there pitching yes for Sam Altman, as he's pitching for a lot of things that are important. But from a resume perspective, actually, Brian's closer to Steve Jobs because he has been a businessman and an industrial designer. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
You hail from a working class family. You and your partner got this idea, I believe, in college.
Yeah, right after college.
Right after college?
Yeah.
What was it called back then?
Yeah, so it started, my parents are social workers. I'm from Albany, New York, outside Albany. And one day, my co-founder now, Joe, says, Brian, come to San Francisco. Let's start a company together. And I remember, like, at that point, like, I was totally, like, I had $1,000 at the bank. So I pack everything in the back of an old Honda Civic. In October 2007, I drive up to San Francisco. And my roommate, Joe, says, Brian, we got one problem. And I said, what's that problem? He said, well, the landlord just raised the rent 25%. And we said, well, what are you going to do? And we always thought that every problem, there was creativity, could work your way out of that problem. And it turns out that that weekend, an international design conference was coming to San Francisco. All the hotels that the conference was recommending were sold out.
Wow.
And then we had an idea. We said, well, what if we just turned our house into a bed and breakfast for this conference? Just like a really simple idea. We could host some extra designers, make some extra money. But I told Joe, I said, we have one problem. And he said, what's that problem? I said, we don't have any beds. I just moved to San Francisco. So Joe says, well, don't worry. We have 3 air beds. We pulled the 3 air beds out of the closet. We inflated them. And we called it airbedandbreakfast.com.
Oh, my God. Air mattress.
Air mattresses. The
Airbnb.
Hosts have now earned $180 billion, but it started with 3 air beds in our living room.
Wow. Air mattress, Airbnb.
That's right.
That's so cool. And it's been $100 billion?
Over $180 billion hosts have earned. Yeah, like so for every like about $1,500 spent in the world, $1 spent on Airbnb. And so obviously we have.
Whoa, repeat that again. Right, back up. Roll that again.
Yeah, so for every like $1,500 spent in the world, one of those dollars is spent on Airbnb. So it's about the size of the economy of Croatia, if you were just compared to a country.
That's unbelievable.
And the amazing thing about it.
Entrepreneurship, my God.
Yeah, well, and I think like you and I have talked about this because you have a goal to spread entrepreneurship around the United States and a million black businesses and around the world. And I think that Airbnb, like think about my story. I became an entrepreneur starting a tech company, but before as a tech entrepreneur, I was a host. Because I took the biggest asset everyone has in their life is their home.
Yeah.
And we said, well, what if within 10 to 20 minutes, you could take your asset and immediately start making money? So we created a system of trust. Because the first time we came up with this idea, I remember somebody said, Brian, I said, yeah. He goes, I hope that's not the only idea you're working on. He said, why? Wow. He said, because strangers will never trust one another to let them in their homes. So we said, well, what if they weren't strangers? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, what if we both had profiles? What if we could message each other? What if all payments handled through the platform? And what if after the stay, you and I reviewed each other? And what if we provided even more protections? Like if your home gets damaged, we'll cover up to $3 million of damage protection. And like we have AI screening technology to prevent parties. And we just did all these different things. And it turns out that when you design a system of trust, suddenly you enable commerce. And you make something easy for people, then suddenly you have millions of entrepreneurs. And so we have over almost 5 million hosts. If you put your home on Airbnb, half the people who put their home on Airbnb get a booking within 3 days. Within 3 days, you start making money, $400 or $500, like immediately. And just in Georgia, here in Georgia, hosts last year earned $500 million.
Wow.
56% of the hosts in Atlanta are women. So it's a very diverse audience, and I think it's the ultimate equalizer.
$500 million
in Georgia, people.
Georgia, just last year.
Just last year in Georgia.
So,
right there, we got a couple out there.
That's one of your hosts right here. So I wonder, and I know we're drifting a little bit in the conversation.
Go where we want.
But I wonder whether there's an opportunity for people of color who've got too much month at the end of their money, who are trying to find innovative ways, legal ways, ethical ways to come up in their life, to build wealth, to build opportunity, to build cash flow and build wealth. I wonder if there's a way for people of color to either use their house as new hosts or buy a house and become a host. Yes. And maybe there's some way that we can tie that in to the work Operation Hope is doing, maybe with things like 1 Million Black Business Initiative. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that absolutely. I know we've been working very closely with your team, and one of the big things that, one of the big tool sets you have is financial literacy. Yeah. And I think one of the pieces of financial literacy is understanding the assets that you have. And again, I think helping people understand that you're already paying for this asset if you already live in a home, or there's an asset available if you want to basically get a second home. And understanding the really basics of cash flow, what Airbnb can generate, what your basic costs are. It is one of the most amazing types of economic opportunities. The average host in the United States makes $14,000 a year. Most of this is supplemental income. And here in Atlanta, I think half the hosts are small business owners. About 1 in 10 are teachers. 1 in 10 are artists. So you've got an incredibly diverse group. And I think one of the things you and I share is, if you want to change the world, you should do 2 things. Well, you should do more than 2 things, but 2 things that we believe. The first thing is allow everyone to be an entrepreneur. Because when everyone's an entrepreneur, then they start to own their own destiny. Yeah. They can lift themselves up. And if we can give the tools for people to be entrepreneurs. The problem is entrepreneur sounds like a big, scary thing. Yeah. But it turns out that everything in the world that was big started small. It started with a single step within 3 days. So if we can make a small step, you can grow. Another thing I've always believed is if you want to change the world, you should bring people together. You should bring people together, especially people that look, sound, and come from different backgrounds. And if you bring those 2 people together, then they're going to realize the other is not so other. People are fundamentally the same. That's right. And the thing I've learned over Airbnb's been used more than 1.5 billion times. So more than Airbnb has been used more than 1.5 billion times in 220 countries and regions. That means that, that's most countries in the world. Other than Iran, North Korea, South Sudan, Crimea, Belarus, Russia, but other than, and it was in Belarus and Russia until obviously last year. So what is that lesson? I am shocked myself at how well this idea works. When we came up with the idea 15, 16 years ago, and you were to tell me that 1.5 billion people would live together, what I've learned, I mean, it sounds like not a good idea, let's be honest. Right. It turns out it works. Because I don't want my cousin Pookie living with me. Yes, exactly. But if he pays me, I might actually do that. It does turn out, though, that most people are fundamentally good, and we are, at some deeper level, 99.9% the same. And it sometimes takes you to travel. It takes you to walk in someone else's shoes to realize that that person, those types of people that I thought were totally different than me, they're not that different after all. And that travel and living together in community can be the ultimate education. And if we can educate enough people about one another, allow them to own their destiny, 5 million hosts today could be tens of millions of hosts. We're adding tens of thousands of Black coast, United States every year. And I believe that's just the beginning, because these are seeds that will turn into, I think, a really big garden.
Brian, question. All the experiences, 1.5 billion in 220 countries, I believe you said, 500 million of revenue just in Georgia last year alone, all this ripple effect, all these experiences. I believe actually you also have lived recently in an Airbnb yourself.
Last night I stayed in one. It was an amazing home. I think is a park called Piedmont Park, right near there. And
Piedmont Park.
Piedmont Park.
Yeah.
I stayed right next to that park. And it was this like family house. I walk in, there was like a piano in the living room, and the family lived there, and they weren't there, but it was like this incredible artifacts of their life. It was a really great place.
Dude, when you rent an Airbnb, this is by the way, this is not the question I was going to ask you, but I'm just nosy. When you rent an Airbnb, do they know it's you?
I don't tell them, but I try not to be a secret shopper. I think sometimes they figure it out, sometimes they don't.
I mean, does it say Brian Chesky on the?
It says my first name, and after they accept a reservation, they get my full name, and they often figure it out, but not always.
And have you had any special surprises when you show up like a marriage proposal or something?
Not yet. There's always time.
Yeah. Do you think that? I hope I didn't give anybody an idea. Do you think that that all these experiences that you have intaked as you're trying to do data and research on the back end of the company, making it better, you're having to process all these experiences that you're seeing in all these countries? Yeah. Real talk, because it can be very intoxicating being one of the wealthiest, most powerful people in commerce in the world. It can go to your head. It hasn't gone to yours. Do you think that all these experiences have actually made you a better person?
Yeah, I remember somebody once said, you tend to be the average of the people you surround yourself with, and you also are the accumulation of all of your experiences. I like to joke, I never really got into this to make a lot of money, because if I did, I wouldn't have been inflating air mattresses. So it did not seem like a good way to make money. And I'm a designer by training, yep. So like my whole thing was I wanted to just design something and solve someone's problem. But I grew up not traveling very much. I remember like once a year, my parents are social workers, so once a year we go on an airplane, because my mom would go to a conference and they would pay for a conference, so it would turn into the family vacation.
Right.
And the first vacation I ever went to was St. Louis, because that's where the conference was, and that was the first time I was in an airplane. Then every year we moved to a different place. And I remember that travel was like the ultimate education, because I don't remember every day I went on a school bus, but I remember every single place I traveled to. I can tell you every trip I've been to, every place I've been, but I can't tell you all the times I went to school. And so travel became like an education for me. But then when I started the company, starting a company, somebody once said, is like jumping off a cliff and assembling the airplane on the way down. Yeah. And you gotta just learn, and I think the number one trait you need, or one of the number one traits, is curiosity.
Yes.
I think that's the same trait that comes from travel.
Yes.
And so am I a better person? I'm a more complete person, because I have seen so much more of the world. I've seen so much more of people. I grew up believing the world was the way it was, and that you have to fit into that world. And you have to, fitting in is a really important thing growing up. And that you can't really change that much about the world. And it is the way it is. And people over there, they're like that, and these people are like this. I mean, it's kind of funny. People without passports tend to be the people with the strongest opinions of other people. That's crazy. And so it turns out that we just need to come in contact with more people, more ideas. When I look at the people on this stage, it's been an incredibly diverse group.
Yes.
And that is one of the superpowers that we all have, is that we shamelessly take the best ideas from everyone, and the best ideas win.
It was really beautiful, by the way, to your point, to see T.I. and Mike Milken and Reggie Jackson and Alex Rodriguez and Toby Lukey, Canadian, and Brian, you, and I may be missing somebody.
Sam Altman. Sam Altman.
Well, yes, I'm talking about just literally.
Just today.
Ambassador Andrew Young in the same room.
Oh, yeah, in the room, yeah.
Having the same conversation. Yeah, Anthony, having the same conversation, concerned about the same things, eating the same food, listening and being interested into the same things, having kindness and respect for each other, hugging each other, loving each other, and all being here for you.
Yeah.
What I'm gonna, so it's, in some ways, you're still a social worker. I mean, your mom and dad were social workers, and in some ways, you're just the world's social worker.
I think that there's something about the model that, like, yeah, it brings people together, and ultimately people want to be listened to. Everyone's got a story, and this is just a context for conversation around kitchen tables all over the world.
So I'm sure you're able to answer the next question because your legal team has already told you what you have to say or not say, or they got to be sued 5 years ago. But I'm fascinated. What's the strangest property you've got on your platform? And what's the weirdest experience you know of on your platform?
So we have some pretty interesting properties on Airbnb. You know, we have 7 million homes, and you'd be shocked the kinds of places we have. So we have a giant boot that you actually sleep in. Somebody built a boot in New Zealand.
A who?
A boot, a giant boot in New Zealand.
A boot?
A boot. Somebody built a, like, obviously oversized boot, about 15 feet tall. Someone else loved, you know, Yellow Submarine, the Beatles song.
Yeah.
They actually created a yellow submarine in the middle of the woods, and this submarine has a waiting list to stay in. We found another person, they built a giant dog. They called it the Dog Bark Park B&B, and you enter through its rear to get into the house. So I could kind of go on and on and on, but like you can rent anything on Airbnb.
Is there anything underwater?
I think we probably do have. We have a lot of things on water. We have literally thousands and thousands of boats. We might be the biggest boat rental company.
Really?
Probably.
I was joking.
No, we have thousands and thousands of boats. We have castles. We have thousands of tree houses. I mean, by the way, like the easiest way, one of the easiest, best ROI I've ever heard of, maybe even better ROI than many tech companies, is a tree house. Because the land isn't very expensive.
Or return on investment.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the land isn't very expensive. The tree houses cost maybe tens of thousands. I mean, they could cost more if they're really nice. But some of these make over $100,000, $200,000 a year. So it's completely crazy.
Wow.
But the weirdest experience, we've had a lot of bizarre ones. I'll just share one. One time, you know, we get millions of people call customer service for all sorts of complaints. And I remember one time somebody called customer service and they said, I want a refund. And we said, well, why do you want a refund? Yeah. And they said, because the house is haunted. There's a ghost in the house. So, you know, typically what we do is if a guest calls, they want a refund, we call the host. And we say, all right. And all the host had to do was say, yeah, there's no ghost, and then the guest can't really provide photo evidence. And so we, but then the host.
Well, we hope the guest can provide.
So the guest says, I want a refund, the house is haunted. And the host says, it is true there's a ghost in his house, but his name is Stanley. He's a friendly ghost, and I disclosed it before booking. And so now the guest and the host have a major dispute over Stanley, the ghost. And that is, as weird as that sounds, we have 4 million people staying in an Airbnb tonight around the world, about 4 million. Which is basically as many people as the city of Los Angeles population.
Yes.
So the 1 in a million, those stories happen every
day.
single day.
Yeah. You forced hotel companies to change their business model. You forced resorts to reimagine their business model. I mean, you've got everybody, you know, running around trying to figure out how they can compete with you, and that's a beautiful thing. On the one hand, it's a compliment. On the other hand, it's stressful because people are trying to put you out of business. And somehow you continue to rise. We had our friend Sam Altman here yesterday, and he pointed toward the future of AI.
Yeah.
You were involved with that, not just because you're his friend, but because you're using
Yes.
artificial intelligence. Let's spend a couple minutes
Yes.
on AI and technology and how that relate to a company that we see as a housing company in most people's eyes. How's it relate to that? Then I want to pivot the time we have left to the future and the vision you have for the company, for the country. We're going to make a case for optimism, if you want to, for our world. And how do we all fit into that? But let's start now with AI and technology.
So, one of the things that like Sam Altman would say, and almost every intelligent person on AI has told me, is that this is going to be one of the greatest technological revolutions in human history. The last big platform shift that changes our lives was probably the mobile phone. The App Store was launched in 2008. Before that would have been the mid-90s with the internet. And before that would have been the 70s or 80s with the microcomputer or the personal computer. And that most people believe that this is going to be bigger than all of them, maybe bigger than all of them combined, more like electricity or more like the Industrial Revolution. And whether or not it is or not, let's just assume that is where this is going because of just the power.
More so than from the horse to the automobile?
Probably, because it will probably affect more than just people moving around. I mean, clearly the automobile changed a lot because it was a major supply chain to change how people move around. But what will not change because of AI? What will not change? There will be some things that won't change, but not many things. It's going to affect everything. So here's what I would say. I think it's a major opportunity. This conference is called Hope. And I think that you should think of an AI as a tool. It's a tool, and we humans are tool builders. What I think the two things that allow our species to be different than other species is our ability to make tools and our ability to cooperate. That's what makes us different than I think every other animal in the animal kingdom. We can cooperate and we can make tools. AI is going to be the most powerful tool ever invented by humanity yet, probably, and it's only going to get more powerful. What AI means is that everyone can have the best teacher you've ever imagined that can be personal to you. Everyone can have the best doctor personalized to them. Scientific discoveries that would have taken 20, 30 years could happen in a matter of years. So many things can be changed with AI. But the thing is that AI is a tool, and we need to put that tool in everyone's hands. Because what we don't want is just a few people designing the future.
That's right.
Right? The more people contribute to building the future, two things happen. Number one, then more people are empowered, and that's good for rights for everyone.
Yes.
But also, better shit is created.
Right.
Because it's everyone's idea.
Yeah.
And so what we need to make sure is that everyone participates in this revolution. And if everyone participates in AI, then I am actually really optimistic for the future. But if everyone does not participate, and only a few people participate, then I'd be very, very concerned about what's going to happen. Because then you're going to have a situation where this is the ultimate haves and have-nots, where you're going to step on the gas and it's going to be like going 1,000 miles an hour, and there's no brake, and there's no reverse, and you just got to go forward. And so we need to make sure that everyone is on the bus for this technological revolution. Again, I think the internet brought in most people in the world. The majority of people in the world are now on the internet. AI is going to be the next revolution, and I think that's how people can help. And I think our business is going to be very much enabled by AI. I can talk about that. Yeah, and so maybe I'll just end by like talking a little bit about the future. So yeah, Airbnb. I'll just start from where I'll end where I started. I never imagined becoming an entrepreneur. I remember like the only entrepreneur I knew growing up was a guy named Bob from Bob's Pizza. And I said I don't want to have a pizza shop, so I didn't think I was going to be an entrepreneur. When I started...
And he wasn't an entrepreneur, he's a business person.
Business person.
You're right.
And I remember when we started Airbnb, I told my mom I'm an entrepreneur. And she said, no, you're unemployed. And I said, no, Mom, I'm an entrepreneur. And that's when I realized when you first start, it's very much a state of mind. There's a sense of intensity and resilience. And the most important thing is that you have to believe it. And then something remarkable happened. over the last 15, 16 years, I've been on one of the most unbelievable rocket rides of a lifetime. And I've seen the world. I've been able to be a small part of changing a lot of things, especially how people travel, how people live, how people monetize their biggest asset. But what I believe is now, we run a public company.
Yep.
We're in the S&P 500.
Yep.
We're one of the larger public companies. Our brand is a noun and a verb used all over the world.
Yep.
And I'm 42 years old. And thank you. And so for me, what do you do when you're 42 years old at this point? I guess you have a couple choices. One is you could say, I did it, be over, do the next thing. You could just keep kind of doing it as you're doing it. But I want to go a different path because I believe that I'm just getting started. I believe the company's just getting started. And I believe that the world needs a lot more help.
Yes.
And for me, I'm a designer by training, so I like to think, what's the problem that I can solve?
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of challenges that are happening in the world. There's a few that I'll point out. It seems like this country is more divided than it's ever been. Certainly more divided than I remember when I was growing up. Yep. And that's surprising because we're all on the internet. We're all on social media. And you'd think the more we would have brought people together online, the more we would have had some common ground. But I think that there's something about bringing people together online that sometimes people repel each other. People don't change their minds in YouTube comment sections. Your Instagram followers aren't coming to your funeral. These things are not happening. But what we can do is if we can help bring enough people together in the physical world, then we can ultimately remind people that they're not so different. The other thing that's happening is people are more lonely than they've ever been. This is the loneliest time in human history.
Yes.
Yes, the Surgeon General of the United States this year put out an advisory warning. And they used to put out advisory warning on cigarettes.
Yes.
The new cigarettes is loneliness.
Yes.
And they're showing that a huge percent of people, as many as half of the people in America are lonely. The loneliest people in America are teenagers. Teenagers. And that a large...
Who are spending all this time on their mobile, their device.
And the lonelier they are, the higher the rates of depression and mental health issues. And so what is the solution to this? Well, we're not proposing we're going to solve this. But I think what we need to do is I think what people are missing is community.
Yes.
And I mean real community in the physical world. They're missing connection with one another. They're missing having real experiences in the physical world. And they're missing a sense of hope that they can change their destiny, that they can do more than just do social media activism, that they can actually get into their community, build their own life, and contribute to their community and meet one another. And so what I want to do in this next chapter of Airbnb is to go much bigger than just monetizing your home. We'll talk about, in the future, maybe I'll come back and tell you more about what those plans are.
Sure.
But I want to really innovate on our system of trust. I want to take the strange out of stranger. I want hundreds of millions of people to really feel like when they come to Airbnb, they have this secure, trusted community. That we, the company, know all about you. We understand your hopes, your dreams, what you want out of your life. And that what we ultimately do, like any good host, is we just match you and connect you to other people. Maybe you need a home, maybe you want to have an experience, you need a service, there's a bunch of things that we can do. And that we can create tens of millions of entrepreneurs. And by bringing enough people together in the physical world, we can make this world feel a little bit smaller. And that's ultimately what I'd like to contribute.
So you're going beyond housing.
Absolutely.
Beyond a rental experience.
I think
giving people a life
there's
experience.
Life experiences. And I think ultimately, education is going to be a big part of it because travel is one of the ultimate, one of the best ways to learn is by traveling.
Expand your mind.
You expand your mind. You have real experiences. They're incredibly vivid. So again,
you and Sarah Fryer next door need to be just talking to each other.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, we're definitely both in the community business. And I just think, I think we're just getting started. But I think that what we need to do, if I were just end with this thought, whatever problems we have in the world, we have the technology to solve. The problem isn't a lack of technology. And this is the worst technology we'll ever be in our lifetime. But what we need is cooperation. And we need a grand vision that we all can work towards. And that vision is going to require cooperation. It's going to be very hard to cooperate if we're fighting. And at some point, we probably need to listen to one another. And I don't know how these arguments that are happening in society get resolved, except for at some point, people listening and working together and realizing that we'll all have more if we work together than if we fight. And again, that's what I think this world is going to need. And almost all problems are global. Global warming, global nuclear armament, the problems are global. Global poverty, these are global problems. The world is getting more interconnected. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity. And I think the next generation, they just need hope. And that hope needs to come from a vision. And that vision needs to come from the sense that you were born in this world, but you can leave behind a better one. And you can change things. And here are the tools. And the tools you have are better than any tools anyone has ever had in human history. And you're as smart as all the people that were born before you. So you're as smart as all the people before you, and you have better tools in them. Then what's stopping you from making anything you want in this world? I think it's a mindset. It's a sense of cooperation. And I think we can build something so much greater than what we have today.
Woo! For $1,500 to $15 million, as Reggie Jackson says, he even owns an Airbnb. From $1,500 a treehouse to $15 million, you can be an Airbnb host.
Anyone can be a host. You can do it in a matter of an hour. You can list from your phone. You can download the app. You can have guests within 3 days making money. We have people to help you. And the basic idea, again, is we just want to make it really easy for people to monetize the biggest asset in their life. And we're just getting started.
And you believe this, switching now back as we wrap this up to this AI conversation, you think that the AI Ethics Council, we're not going to try to do what the government is trying to do, but this concept of having an ethics council that puts a moral and ethical framework around this so that not only the opportunities are shared, but also the risk are acknowledged, and we try to really work on them before they overwhelm us. These are all good.
The faster something grows, the more you have to think about it before you do it. That's a really simple principle, right? Once the genie's out of the bottle, you don't put it back in the bottle. And so if we're going to unleash the most powerful tools known to humanity and give them into the hands of everyone, then we should be thoughtful, very thoughtful, about what we're making and how we want people to use them, because they're going to use them. And the one thing I've learned building Airbnb is if you put something in the hands of 100 million or 1 billion people, there will be unintended consequences. You cannot perfectly predict what 1 billion people will do with a powerful tool. That's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah.
But you have to be very thoughtful. And you don't want a situation where only the people building have a say in what they're building. It's like we build a city and only the general contractors get to have a say in what the buildings are. That'd be crazy.
Yes.
The whole city participates in the building. Now, we probably don't want it to be as hard to build as it is in many cities.
Yes.
So we're going to have to not stifle innovation. We're going to have to realize we don't want to suffocate this amazing opportunity to create wealth for everyone. But we also don't want to get in a car and drive 1,000 miles in a school zone. We want to be really thoughtful about doing this. So there's some balance here. There's a balance between terrifying everyone and putting on the brakes, which is bad because I think that's going to then stifle a huge amount of opportunity, and it's going to take away hope from the next generation.
And bad guys on the other side of the world will then get
But
ahead.
you don't just then blindly close your eyes.
Yeah.
That there's a really wonderful balance in between. Where that is, we have to negotiate together. And what you ultimately want are people working together, really intelligent people to figure out, because what we're really doing when we do that is we're designing the future that we all want to live in. And we're using it through the most important technology that we're about to put in everyone's hands. And so I think this is a great thing. I think you want, the other thing is we want to learn the lessons of prior generations.
Yes.
Like you build a building and there are architects and they learn from thousands of years of buildings before them.
Yes.
If we're going to redesign society with this technology, we should learn the lessons of the past.
Yes.
And there are many people that bring those lessons. We want to learn. We want to listen. We want to incorporate them, and that's going to lead to the best design for the future.
I want to thank, you can't make this up. You were not designed, it was not planned that Brian would be the last speaker of the 10th annual Hope Global Forum. That was supposed to be Michael Milken, but Michael had to go do something, and so Brian was gracious and said, I'll go last. But you can't make this up. This is just perfect.
Thank you.
Because God just used you to say exactly what we needed to hear as the final conversation of this meeting that's been shot around the world. Millions of people will watch this within a week. You brought care and inclusive capitalism into the same conversation. And as one of the wealthiest, most privileged people in the world, you humbled yourself and you connected yourself with the least of these God's children. And you said, I can't be me without you being you. That's what I heard. And for that, I didn't just hear your brain, Brian. I felt the heartbeat of your heart.
Well,
and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you.
Enjoy the Hope Global Forum. You got 2 minutes? I want you to do something unnatural. You got pride, you've got education, you got degrees, you all know you've been successful. But I used to get on a plane and travel all across the country to meet somebody. I followed Ambassador Andrew Young for a decade. He didn't know who I was and didn't want to know. But I wanted to touch his hand. I wanted to feel what it felt. I want that energy to pulsate through me. First time I met a billionaire, I wanted to touch his hand. I wanted to look in his eyes and understand what made them tick. I want you to humble yourselves. I want you to know that God made you equal in intelligence, but not yet, maybe so yet in opportunity. I want to transfer that energy and opportunity because you're not a human being having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. Come up here and shake this man's hand and let some of this energy that he has pulsate through you. Enjoy the rest of your day.